Most of us have a love-hate relationship with sleep, right? We love it when we get it, but it often escapes our grasp. My name is Erin Morose. I'm a senior here at Regis, and I'm studying biology with a minor in chemistry. And tonight, I want to talk about the metabolic importance of sleep and why we should care how much sleep we get. When thinking of a healthy lifestyle, what are some of the most important things that come to mind?
Diet.
Right. So exercise and diet were probably the two main things that hopped into your mind. But I want to argue that there's a third aspect to a healthy lifestyle, one that is equally or maybe even more important than those two combined, and that is sleep. So, on that note, who feels like they had enough sleep last night and are well rested? Wow, lucky you guys. Well, I'm sure most of us who didn't have our hands up are pretty jealous of those who did. I think it's funny how when we are younger, we like to make fun of people that go to bed early. You know, we call them grandmas, grandpas, and we make sure they know that they missed out on the most fun thing that has happened in the century. Yet once we are tired and busy and stressed, we get quite jealous of them. I personally have been made fun of quite a bit throughout my life for this. I used to and still do try to get enough sleep, around 7 or 8 hours a night. This would mean in high school I was going to bed between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m., though to my dismay it has now shifted between 8:30 and 10:30 p.m., which is still pretty good. And I still get made fun of. I remember a freshman year here, a lab partner of mine called me with a question about our lab notebooks, and he called me at 8:45 p.m., thinking that I'd still be awake. He was shocked, laughing on the other end of the phone when I answered, had my retainer in, had to take my retainer out, was still super groggy because he thought, you know, if I called you before 9, I thought I'd be okay. But I want to know, why do we make fun of people for not getting enough sleep? Well, we live in a society where we are so focused on jobs and money, we are told sleep is for the weak. Because after all, if time equals money, we don't have time to sleep because we need to make that money, and apparently we can't make money if we're asleep. If you can figure that out, let me know. It's also ingrained in our minds that we must increase productivity, and if with upcoming deadlines, we don't have time for sleep. Plus, Pat knows this, if we have coffee, there's no need for sleep, right? It replaces it. Or does it? Now, this stigma has unfortunately had a huge negative impact on our society. About 20% of Americans have issues related to sleep and wakefulness disorders. Now, when I talk about a lack of sleep, I don't mean going to bed late here and there a few nights. I mean weeks and months running on very little sleep, constantly feeling tired, run down, and exhausted. So, with that, however, 1/3 of Americans get fewer than 7 hours of sleep per night. And this can have drastic consequences on our everyday lifestyles and routines, such as the 5,000 to 6,000 fatal car crashes that occur each year that are related to sleep-deprived drivers. And ironically, in an effort to increase productivity and profits, we actually lose about $50 billion because we are trying to abandon sleep. But if you think about it, if we're not getting enough sleep, our work quality is not as high and we're not as impressive, so we're losing money, in fact. But not only does this have an effect on our everyday lives and tasks and routines, it also negatively influences our health. A lack of sleep can interfere with your emotional responses and learning. It can also be detrimental for your cells because a good amount of sleep is critical for our cells' health and repair. And unfortunately, a lack of sleep can increase stress on the heart and also increase insulin resistance, both of which are related to chronic illnesses. And why should we care about chronic illnesses? As you saw earlier, chronic illnesses are becoming more prevalent in our society. If we reflect, the most common causes of death in the past fall into the more acute category, though some do go into the chronic. But these are from things such as diarrhea, tuberculosis, and chronic respiratory diseases. But when we think about today, the most common causes of death fall into solely the chronic category. Most people today are dying of things such as cancer and heart disease, and diabetes now even has its own bar on the graph. And while these diseases are influenced by many variables, some outside of our control, our lifestyles and the way we carry out our everyday lives has a huge impact on our health. So, in addition to diet and exercise, it is just as important to get enough sleep, because sleep is very closely tied to our metabolism. When it comes to sleep and metabolism, our days can be split into two distinct states: when we are awake and feeding, and when we are fasting and sleeping. Now, when we are awake, we're constantly moving, constantly eating, and our body is working really hard to burn the food that we consume for energy. We're also doing things such as storing nutrients for later and secreting insulin so that we can store the sugar for later if we need it. And while these are important processes that occur while we're awake, there are other processes that occur while we're asleep that are just as critical to our health and homeostasis. We are doing things such as breaking down our fat and glycogen stores, or glycogen is also stored sugar, and we are secreting leptin, which is an important hormone, and we're breaking down our fats. So first, let's look at the importance of glucagon secretion and glycogenolysis. Glucagon secretion is important because it's essentially the opposite of insulin. When you're secreting glucagon, your cells are actually signaled to release glycogen, and so whereas insulin tells your body to store the glycogen and sugar, glucagon tells it to release it. So our glucagon is talking to our pancreas cells, and we're breaking down these stores. The process of breaking down these stores is called glycogenolysis. Glycogenolysis occurs when the glycogen becomes phosphorylated, and it can be rearranged into usable forms of glucose, which can then enter these processes such as glycolysis, oxidative phosphorylation, and citric acid and Krebs cycle. Thus, when thinking about these processes, if we are spending more time awake, we are not sleeping as much. So we are not doing these things as much as we should be. This means that we are not breaking down these stores, which increases our overall sugar stores and less likely leading to obesity. Obesity, unfortunately, is then linked to other diseases such as cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. So if we're increasing our fat stores and increasing our obesity, we're getting an increased chance of these chronic illnesses. Also, if we are not secreting glucagon as much, it is likely that we are increasing our insulin secretion. A prolonged exposure to insulin and an increased secretion overall can reduce our cells' sensitivity to insulin, and that is a huge risk factor for type 2 diabetes. Another key process that occurs while we are asleep is gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis is a complicated process which can be simplified to taking non-carbohydrate carbon molecules, such as amino acids, fat, triglycerides, glycerol, and pyruvate or lactate, which are made from other things in our metabolic processes, and we feed them into this cycle. Initially, these compounds are converted into pyruvate and oxaloacetate, and eventually all the other compounds that are formed in glycolysis are produced, except this time in a reverse order. The final steps take fructose 1,6-bisphosphate and convert it back into glucose. And then this glucose actually feeds back into glycolysis, where it is then broken down. So we are essentially breaking down what we just made. But that is needed in order to have ATP and enough energy to carry out our day. Even while we're sleeping, we need energy. So this process is critical to our health. And as before, if we're decreasing the amount of time that we are undergoing gluconeogenesis, we are not utilizing our stores of fats and other carbon molecules. This, once again, can increase your risk of obesity, which can lead to the other chronic illnesses that we do not want, such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. Next, let's take a look at lipid catabolism and leptin secretion. Keep pressing the laser. Lipid catabolism is exactly what it sounds like. We are breaking down our lipid stores for energy. These fats that we have stored up in our fatty tissues and whatnot can be broken down into glycerol and fatty acids. Those can then lead into the Krebs or citric acid cycle, and so we're breaking down these stores when we're asleep. We can also secrete leptin when we're asleep. And leptin, for those of you who don't know, is an extremely important hormone through our body. It regulates things such as blood pressure, it activates our immune cells, it suppresses glucose-stimulated insulin secretion, which, as we saw before, is linked to type 2 diabetes. And one of the most important parts is it controls our appetite, which thus, in a sense, it controls our metabolism, right? How much we eat is very important when we are talking about our metabolism. So, as you can infer, if we're not breaking down these lipid stores, we're increasing our lipid overall percentage, right? And so we have an increased risk of obesity, then cancer, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease, all of which we do not want to have. In addition, leptin secretion is extremely important because if we're awake, we're likely more able to access food, right? We can't really sleep eat, but you can eat a ton when you're awake. And I don't know about you guys, but those late night Taco Bell runs, those probably could have been avoided if I had been in bed 3 hours ago. And so it is important that we increase the amount of time, or at least have the correct amount of time that we are undergoing all of these processes, so that we are using a balance, right? When we're awake, we're storing all these things, and when we're asleep, we're breaking them down. So we need a nice, even balance of both of these in order to make sure that we aren't gaining weight, which leads to these chronic illnesses. So are we really doing nothing when we're asleep? Well, it may seem that we are being lazy or unproductive by promoting sleep and ensuring we get enough of it. The opposite is actually true. Our bodies are completing a wide variety of processes to keep us alive and in prime condition. Sleep allows us to reset and restart. But as you can see, a chronic lack of sleep means significantly less time spent in that sleep fasting state. This means we are not breaking down our stores of glycogen, lipids, and other carbon molecules. This decreases, because of this, we are then increasing the amount of time that we are secreting insulin, we are storing more sugars, we are building cholesterol, we are building our fats, all things that you don't really want going on a ton of the time. So it is important that we increase the amount of sleep so that we can increase these processes, because when we lose a ton of sleep and a chronic lack of sleep, we are increasing our risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and cancer, the leading common causes of death. Though these are alarming, right, and scary, and you kind of are freaking out right now, like, oh crap, I better get to bed at 8 tonight, but this goes till 8. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, right? These aren't permanent values, right? We can do this. It has actually been shown that making these changes and improving sleep can prevent the onset of and the management of these chronic illnesses. So we can prevent it, and if we already have these existing conditions, we can manage them. For example, because there is a relationship between short sleep duration and excess body weight gain, we must emphasize the importance of getting more sleep in our society as a whole. Improving the amount of time spent sleeping and overall quality of sleep has been demonstrated to aid in weight loss and promote a healthy lifestyle. Who knew that sleeping can help you lose weight? You don't have to go run on the treadmill. Well, actually, all of you should know, hopefully, because we just went through what occurs metabolically while we're asleep. Additionally, sleep is a good indicator of the regulation of blood sugar controls in type 2 diabetes patients and healthy individuals. So if we're getting more sleep, we're improving our overall regulation and kind of balance of our blood sugars, which is extremely important in preventing diseases such as obesity and type 2 diabetes. It has also been shown in different studies that those who get good quality sleep without interruption from sleep apnea or anxiety or 3 a.m. phone calls, we all have a lower risk of heart disease than their counterparts. And because all these diseases influence our risk of cancer, if we sleep and increase the sleep, we are helping our chances of not getting all of the other diseases and strengthening our overall bodies, which can improve our chances of staying healthy and not succumbing to cancer, though there are other variables. Thus, it is absolutely critical that we understand the consequences of a chronic lack of sleep and make the necessary changes to ensure that we are getting enough sleep each night. It is our responsibility to promote and foster healthy lifestyles by getting more sleep. This includes making sure you, your loved ones, including your children, and all of those around you understand the importance of getting enough sleep. To note, it is important that we really emphasize this in children because it has been shown that children actually experience a larger weight gain when they lose sleep than like adults. So if we want a healthy and productive future, we need to make changes now to ensure that happens, not only in our own lives as adults, but also in the lives of our children. So we have all heard that the magic number of how much sleep you should get is 8 hours, right? Who has heard that? That's 8 hours, that's it, no more, no less. Well, I want to point out that this is just an average. This means some of us need less sleep, around 6, to feel our best, and some of us, myself included, need around 10 hours of sleep to feel at the top of our game. I encourage you to reflect and determine how much sleep is right for you, and aim to get that amount each night. Now, I know this is easier said than done, but I have some helpful tips that hopefully can help you get that much sleep each night. First, set a bedtime and stick to it. A routine is your friend. Try to be in bed within a 1 hour window of your desired bedtime. Oh geez. Next, make sure you have a conducive sleep environment. Make sure it is relaxing, dark, and comfortable. Also, only use your bed for sleep. Don't use it for Netflix or work or reading, because by only using it for sleep, it'll train your mind to recognize that it's time for bed once you get in your bed. Next, no electronics. Put away those phones, video games, laptops, TVs, tablets, whatever else, Apple Watches, all the technology we have. It is important because the light emitted from these screens actually inhibit different hormones, and specifically melatonin, which promotes sleepiness. Thus, by exposing yourself to these electronic screens, you are preventing sleep because you're inhibiting this melatonin. This makes it harder to fall asleep and stay asleep. Plus, who knows, for me personally, who knows what drama and deadlines and stress may keep you awake if you're on these electronics, right? Who knows who posted what selfie with who, or oh crap, I forgot that homework. That will stress you out. That will keep you awake. But with no electronics, also turn off all the lights. This means alarm clocks and any other light sources, because our eyes are very sensitive. So even if you're like, well, my eyes are closed and my alarm clock produces very minimal light, it can actually impact the sleep and the quality of your sleep, because it prevents these hormones and we can detect it. Next, relax the mind. This is probably the most important one for me. Make sure you're trying to de-stress and unwind before bed. Don't think about upcoming deadlines or what happened earlier today that stressed you out. Just focus on getting a good night's sleep. Make sure you don't exhaust yourself with too many responsibilities. For me, I was pretty bad at saying no to people, and I tried to kind of load my plate, and then I realized I wasn't getting enough sleep and I was getting sick. So what helped me was learning to say no to the different responsibilities. I encourage you to have a conversation with your boss, your professors, or your peers, within reason, of course. I mean, you're still going to have homework and tasks and deadlines, but make these appropriate changes to benefit your well-being and your overall health. Because after all, a sleepy employee, student, or classmate can be more detrimental than anyone or anything that could have been done while you're asleep. Also, another thing for this is meditation. As we saw earlier, meditation is a great way to relax and kind of de-stress and get ready in the right frame of mind for sleep. There are apps, there are free apps, there are online websites dedicated to how to meditate. I encourage you, if you struggle with de-stressing, to use some of these and see if it works for you. Finally, make sleep a priority. I cannot emphasize this enough. Often in college and in work, we are not making sleep a priority. We're saying we have to get this done, and we have to study, and we have to cram, and we have to get these tests graded. We need to stop. We need to take a deep breath, and we need to realize that sleep is more important for the most part than all of these issues. For me, cramming does not help. Getting 8 hours of sleep does help. So, if that's not enough incentive to me yelling at you to get enough sleep, think about all the issues that come with a lack of sleep. The car crashes, the loss in productivity. And if that's not incentive enough, your health, your metabolism, you're preventing these chronic illnesses. We need to recognize that sleep is critical in preventing chronic illnesses and making sure we're at the top of our game. So, in addition to diet and exercise, we need to realize that sleep is just as or more important in maintaining a healthy lifestyle. So do not worry about getting made fun of. Just shake it off. And do not worry about what your boss may say, because sleep is not for the weak or the lazy. Sleep is for the productive, the healthy, and overall the successful.